So before we go deep into psychedelic exploration, it's helpful to have a little bit of context about psychedelics. Specifically, we're going to tackle just a few of the big myths that are out there about psychedelics and around psychedelic spaces so that we can all be on common and hopefully somewhat balanced ground before we get too ahead of ourselves. As I'm sure you know, there's no lack of misinformation when it comes to psychedelics. The goal of breaking down myths is really to lay some contextual groundwork so that we don't go into any situation or experience naively or with false assumptions or unrealistic expectations. Now, since you are all at different places in your psychedelic exploration, some of these may be informative or they may just be fun and entertaining. Either way, let's bust some myths. When it comes to myths about psychedelics, here's a counterculture favorite. Psychedelics make you a better person. I'm sure many of you have heard someone say, if only politicians or whoever had to take such and such psychedelic before taking office, the world would be a better place. Or maybe you've also heard the story, which was originally written as satire, about some guy trying to dump tons of LSD into Los Angeles' water supply, trying to bring about an awakening of humanity. And I'm sorry to say it, but psychedelics are not going to simply make you or anyone else a better person. The idea of taking psychedelics and putting flowers in our hair and everybody being peaceful and happy forever is just not really accurate, regardless of whatever photos of Woodstock or Burning Man you may have seen. Maybe a better way to think about psychedelics is that they can be potentiators and they can magnify qualities that are already present. So this could be emotional states like compassion, or it could be states like hatred. Alt-right and neo-Nazi use of psychedelics like LSD maybe provide a good example, or even the Manson family. The very idea that psychedelics make you a better person would suggest that the Manson family probably wouldn't have killed so many people, or sooner or later, these neo-Nazi cult people wouldn't be neo-Nazis anymore, but that doesn't always seem to be the case. Now, that's not to say it can't happen, as illustrated by the story of Brendan, a leader of a US-based white nationalist group whose radical views radically shifted during an MDMA experience while he was taking part in a scientific study. Psychedelics are absolutely capable of creating big shifts in the way that people view the world, but that doesn't necessarily indicate a reliable outcome or a bias of these substances. And this is despite their pretty reliable ability to bring about mystical experiences. As the study Right-Wing Psychedelia, Case Studies in Cultural Plasticity and Political Pluripotency, whatever that means, as this study explores, it's not so simple as the liberal lean that many people have placed on psychedelics following the hippie boom of the 60s and 70s. Rather, it seems that the psychedelic experience can and repeatedly has been integrated into authoritarian-style worldviews and other forms of extremist beliefs. So, when it comes to really powerful negative emotions like hate or to ingrained behavioral or social maladaptations, things like narcissism or sadism or sociopathy, psychedelics have the potential to really actually ingrain or entrench these things deeper. So to personify them in a simple way, psychedelics are mostly ambivalent. Sure, through this altered state of perception, depending on the context that we take them in, and depending on the setting, etc., we may experience a deeper connection to nature or a deeper connection to other humans or other beings. And all of this can help in the process of becoming a better human, if that's a value of ours and if that's something that we strive for in our everyday lives, right? But this isn't just a natural side effect of psychedelic use. The idea that psychedelics make you a better person really sets up false expectations about what a psychedelic experience is. Kind of like thinking that psychedelics are miracle drugs that can just take away your problems like a magic trick, or that they'll tell you the ultimate truths of the universe. In unfortunate scenarios, this mentality can provide people with a false sense of righteousness or perceived superiority, and it's probably worth mentioning that if you come across people in psychedelic events, communities, and ceremonies, especially people who are in positions of power or authority, who model these qualities like superiority, they might not be trustworthy people, and at the very least, might not be worth spending much of your time around. So as you can see, you never know what the psychedelic experience may bring, but what's really more important about psychedelics is our intention for using them. And if being a better person, or if cultivating wholesome qualities is part of our intention, then no doubt psychedelics may be able to assist us in that process of growing into ourselves and into a more compassionate and empathic way of living. They're powerful tools. But the intention for which we use them, paired with the appropriate supports set and setting, is really more relevant for determining the outcome in the long run than any specific or reliable result like becoming a better person or attaining enlightenment or something like that. So long story short, don't wait around for psychedelics to make you or anyone else a better person or the world a better place. But if those are values of yours, then don't forget that many others share those values, and every day presents countless opportunities to practice living by the values that each of us hold dear. That simple practice might not make us perfect, but it will most certainly help us be the best that we can be. And the best part of that is, we won't need any barrels of LSD or anything else coming out of the taps to get us there. I think it's safe to say that with most things in life, more is not better. But with psychedelics, this is especially true. It's important to note that different psychedelics have different dose response curves, which is to say that as you increase the dose or the amount of the substance that you take, the response or the effects that your body and mind may experience may change at a different rate. So it's not necessarily 1 capsule plus 1 capsule plus 1 capsule equals 1 plus 1 plus 1 effect. Some psychedelics will actually have an exponential growth curve of subsequent effects. So 1 capsule, 2 capsule, 3 capsule might mean 1 plus 2 plus 4 effect. So what that means is that when you take more of certain psychedelics, the effects that you feel in your body and mind may increase at an unexpectedly rapid rate. And this can be really problematic if the experience becomes really uncomfortable, overwhelming, or even frightening. Or perhaps we become really confused or we panic, There's all sorts of things that can go wrong when there's too much of a psychedelic substance in our system for our psyche to handle in that moment. And especially if we've taken multiple substances without testing them or checking how they will interact with other things, there could be problems. There's an old saying that goes, you can always take more, you can never take less. And this is kind of a good piece of wisdom to keep in mind with psychedelics, that it's better to have an experience that maybe doesn't even reach the place that you wanted it to reach, and then to try again later, than it is to try too hard to reach a certain point and have that lead you into a potentially harmful or dangerous or scary situation. Yes, I am talking to you reckless psychonauts out there. By the way, those of you who are exploring psychedelic use for whatever purpose, the best way to minimize risks so that you can focus on cultivating the benefits is to follow a proven framework. The 7-step framework for psychedelic use is built on straightforward, down-to-earth harm reduction principles aimed to tackle the risks and challenges that people like you face navigating the world of psychedelics right now. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. This concept, more is not better, is also relevant to frequency of use. It's highly beneficial, and some would say essential, to take a good amount of time in between experiences to ensure that we're processing and integrating the thoughts, feelings, emotions, symbols, insights, etc. that come up during our journey. And integration is just as important for recreational types of use, like social or entertainment settings, as it is for ceremonial or ritualistic use. Layering on one trip after another without taking time out to process our memories of a journey and to be present and mindful of our internal world can lead to all sorts of problems down the road, or at least lead to us not getting the benefit that we're looking for. This is perhaps especially true when people fall into the trap of thinking that one more experience or one higher dose is going to get them to where they want to be. If you've fallen for that in the past, as I have, I'd invite you to share down in the comments if you think your experience might help someone else. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of exploration and the novelty of the experience, but we really benefit from staying mindful and not falling for the trap of relying on psychedelics to be miracle drugs or quick fixes to take away our problems or change our reality. Taking more psychedelics doesn't mean that you're going to get any closer to where you want to be or any more of the result that you maybe experienced in the past. Perhaps more importantly, though, tackling the myth of more is better is really about confronting the cultural notion of the hero dose, and the idea that high doses of psychedelics are better or more advanced or, again, a badge for the ego, At Psychedelic Knapsack, we're given the thumbs down to the term heroic dose, as we believe that it contributes to encouraging people who may not otherwise be drawn to high-dose experiences to try them. And the reality is that high-dose experiences do come with serious psychological risks for a lot of people that lower-dose experiences wouldn't come with. As well, some people are naturally curious about higher doses and others aren't. There's no reason to encourage those who aren't already seeking out those experiences on their own or bring any sort of competitiveness or social pressure into taking drugs. It's not a competition, right? So, in our opinion, more is not better when it comes to psychedelics. Now, one favorite myth is that psychedelics are party drugs. And absolutely, psychedelics can be party drugs. People take psychedelics in social settings like parties or festivals or entertainment settings all the time. But the greatest power of psychedelics may lie in their ability to act as catalysts for our own personal growth and healing. And no doubt, if you've experienced psychedelics in a social setting, you may well have experienced personal growth and transformation or healing through those settings. And absolutely, even using psychedelics as party drugs can be therapeutic and it can be beneficial. But it really depends on your intention for taking psychedelics, the people you're with, and the awareness and presence that you apply to your experience and the time around it. So if your intention really is more about personal growth or healing or self-exploration, then using psychedelics as party drugs might not be the best means to find the result that you're looking for. Likewise, if you find that you're curious about trying larger doses of psychedelics or psychedelics that bring about really intense experiences like ego death or out-of-body experiences, or these fully immersive effects like DMT and some of these tryptamines, then party-style settings are definitely not going to be an ideal fit for that intention. But really, people who use psychedelics as party drugs often also have other intentions, which can absolutely align with personal growth and healing. These other intentions could be things like connecting with others on a deeper level, shared experiences, self-expression, community, a sense of belonging. And this unique crossover of party drugs and healing substances has really contributed to a growing movement in psychedelic culture towards the idea of transformational events and festivals, and the incorporation of sanctuaries and other harm reduction resources geared towards helping people navigate the psychedelic experience at various events, venues, and festivals. Substances like MDMA and ketamine, which are not the classic serotonergic psychedelics, but which are often considered to be psychedelics, have also widely been used as party drugs. And of course, ecstasy is perhaps what first comes to mind when people think of party drugs. But LSD, phenethylamines, psilocybin, and other tryptamines are all used in recreational settings as well. As Tom Nabin, criminologist and drug researcher at the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, says in this Vice article, How Psychedelics Became the New Club Drug, your experience on psychedelics can be much richer. They do a lot of different things to your senses, he explains. In a club setting, they can open the door to new ways of connecting. People used to be very careful because they were scared of tripping, Nabin continues, but now they're experimenting with smaller doses, which allows them to use them in different settings. These doses can be combined with other substances too. Those last words raise an important point though. Those who do use psychedelics as party drugs, especially alongside the use of other substances, need to be very aware of what substances, chemicals, foods, etc. could result in undesirable or dangerous interactions. There are numerous negative interactions that can come from mixing certain psychedelics with other drugs or medications. As well, it's important to know exactly what the substance is that you're taking, and oftentimes that requires testing. So psychedelics are not just party drugs. They're incredibly unique and powerful substances that research is showing can really assist in personal healing and personal growth. But with proper care and supports given to preparation and integration, even recreational and party-style use may well bring about some of these potential benefits. But oftentimes, when there are underlying challenges a person is facing, taking psychedelics can result in some challenging side effects. And people with mental health difficulties, for example, or unprocessed trauma, may be more inclined to end up on a bad trip. As Ruby, a recreational psychedelic user who had some difficult trips herself, says in a quote from the same Vice article, "When it's over, you realize that the trip can teach you something, because everything you saw or felt was already inside of you," she says. Some things feel scary, but they mean something deeper. What I learned from this is that psychedelics hold up a mirror. So before using psychedelics as party drugs, maybe the real question to ask is, do you need to take a deep look in the mirror first? If so, then personally, I wouldn't want that mirror to be the one hanging in the bathroom at some dirty nightclub. But maybe that's just personal preference. Contrary to popular belief among great-grandparents, psychedelics are not addictive. And some of them, like psilocybin, are being shown to be anti-addictive, powerful tools for healing from addiction and helping to shift addictive behaviors. seemingly with long-lasting benefits. This is something that Western models have struggled to facilitate effectively. Even therapy approaches often lack the necessary tools to tackle addiction without the help of spiritual influences, like finding a renewed faith or a sense of meaning in life. It's worth noting that just because a substance is not inherently addictive, in contrast to something like opiates, for example, which is highly addictive, that doesn't mean that it has no addictive potential. There's always the possibility of impulsive, unhealthy, or abusive behaviors with anything that we ingest. And especially if we have a habit of maybe using substances to alter our consciousness as a crutch, maybe avoiding our reality or situations or obligations in the real world, or catching ourselves falling into that trap of one more journey or one more psychedelic experience will get me to where I want to be or show me the answer that I'm looking for or take away my problem. Sometimes ingrained addictive patterns of behavior or a lack of self-awareness can make it possible to apply those addictive patterns even onto things that wouldn't normally cause addiction. But as early as the 50s and 60s, substances like LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, and DMT were being studied for a wide range of applications, and evidence was suggesting considerable anti-addictive potential. An interesting term for psychedelics being thrown around these days that you might not have heard much over the past few decades is psychoplastogens. As this study says, psychedelics belong to a more general class of compounds known as psychoplastogens, which robustly promote structural and functional neuroplasticity in key circuits relevant to brain health. And it's this rapid disruption in ingrained thought patterns and behaviors that is considered to be a crucial element of psychedelics' power to assist people in breaking free from addiction. As Professor David Nutt observes in his interview, The Neuroscience of Psychedelic Drugs with Technology Networks, the common factor in those three disorders, referring to tobacco, alcohol, and depression, is the inability of the brain to disengage from maladaptive brain processes. What psychedelics do in the actual trip itself is have a powerful disrupting effect on brain circuits which underpin those repetitive processes. It's that disruption that allows people to escape from disorder. Our belief is that any disorder that is accompanied by what you might call locked-in overthinking could respond. So it's exciting to consider the potential of these new allies in the fight against addiction and other mental health challenges. But we also want to keep our heads on straight so that those who are looking to battle addiction with psychedelics can create the supports around them that will really assist in making that transition. Dr. Nutt goes on to say this about self-medication, and although he labels depression here, it's likely valid for any type of healing intention, and these challenges often overlap. He says, I do have worries about depressed people using it recreationally because we have found that the effects of psilocybin in depression are usually very difficult, painful, and challenging. And I would not have been comfortable with people self-medicating in the middle of a mountain with mushrooms if they go through the kind of trips that our depressed patients went through. If you're using these for medicine, you need to have appropriate psychotherapy and medical cover. So addiction can be a really big challenge, and it's one that we, as a society, could really use some new tools to work with. So it's not surprising that there's so much excitement about the research into psychedelic substances. Nowadays, more and more research is showing strikingly positive evidence that psychedelics themselves are not addictive, but rather, psychedelics treat addiction. Do you have any personal stories of using psychedelics to treat addiction? We'd love to hear in the comments some of your thoughts and experiences or questions. Let's be honest, there's always a chance of going a little crazy when taking any psychoactive substance into your body. But psychedelics don't seem to be inherently dangerous, and even most difficult or even frightening experiences can often end up being helpful and informative once they're over and processed. There is now substantial scientific evidence that many of these substances are actually quite safe for a healthy, normal human mind, body, and spirit. But of course, that is a pretty general statement, and although psychedelics are not naturally dangerous or likely to make you crazy, we still have to be cautious and aware of any possible underlying conditions, be it physical, psychological, or otherwise, that could interact badly with any given substance. As well, knowing which medications, supplements, or foods that don't mix with whichever psychedelic substance is in question will help avoid collateral damage from something unrelated. Although cases are quite rare, it's worth noting that psychedelics have been documented to potentially trigger psychosis or persistent symptoms of psychosis in people who do have some of these predisposed risk factors, like a personal or a family history of severe mental illness, as well as in people who were not clearly predisposed. Now, The data is lacking, and it doesn't tell us everything, but it does suggest caution with known contraindications is obviously important. It's also important to note here, though, that when individuals consider and align their personal setting and intention for psychedelic use, as well as the appropriate dosage, this could likely have an effect of significantly lowering the risks that come with psychedelic contraindications. It's wild to think that some ideas like psychedelics making you crazy or frying holes in your brain are so deeply ingrained in our cultural psyche, while MDMA, the subject of some of those claims of burning brain holes, is now entering phase 3 clinical trials and labeled a breakthrough therapy by the FDA. A lot of the core beliefs that people had about psychedelics over the last few decades have been rooted in complete falsehoods about their damage to our brains. But nowadays, many of the world's great minds are pulling back the veil. As Gerald Rosenbaum, director of the Center for Neuroscience of Psychedelics at Massachusetts General Hospital and professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, said, one of the features of psychedelics is that they open up a window of what's called neuroplasticity, where you see evidence of neurons starting to bud and establish new connections. At the time of some of the earlier studies on psychedelics in the 1950s, neuroplasticity wasn't even an accepted theory, let alone neurogenesis, the process that Dr. Rosenbaum is referring to. Perhaps, despite their Schedule I label, these substances actually do the opposite of what we've so often been told. It's nice to have the peace of mind knowing that they are generally safe, but it's actually not uncommon for people to feel like they are going crazy during the experience. As Itai Danovich says in this interview with Everyday Health, intoxication with psychedelics can cause people to feel like they're losing their minds. In most cases, after the psychedelic agent is metabolized or eliminated from the body, the intoxication syndrome resolves and a clear sense of reality returns. Difficult experiences can be frightening, but it's helpful to remember that the effects are always temporary, and even if it feels like it will last forever, it won't. But this does illustrate why it's best not to take these substances too lightly, and to make sure that we're in a good place mentally and emotionally, and that we know our reasons for taking a substance. And if we're looking to use these substances for healing or therapeutic purposes, then it is important to have these professional supports in place. Danovich went on to say in the interview, the therapeutic benefits of psychedelic drugs appear to depend on psychotherapy, which helps patients process the experience, develop insights, and pursue meaningful change. So don't let ideas like going crazy or frying your brain scare you off of psychedelics if you are serious about exploring these substances safely. But also don't let all the good news fool you into thinking that there's nothing to worry about. As perceptions about psychedelics change, the way that we think about using them can change too. Hopefully by breaking down both the fear and the excitement, we can take a more balanced approach to psychedelic substances in the future. Another myth I want to mention, which is not really a myth, but the idea that being curious is a good enough reason to take psychedelics. Now, I'm not here to poke fun at or to claim that anyone's intentions for taking psychedelics are valid or not, but I would challenge you that if you would answer the question of what your intention for using psychedelics is by saying that you're just curious about them, then I would challenge you to look a little bit deeper to find a stronger reason. Because generally, if there's a curiosity, there's something behind that curiosity as well. And the potential for these substances to catalyze transformation and to catalyze growth and development and maturation as a human is really maximized by having intentions that are really aligned with self-awareness and with an understanding of what our reasons are, what our vision is for why and where we are going through this experience, and with a plan to get there. And so intention is a really important part of making the most of a psychedelic experience. So if that's you, try looking a little deeper. See if there's a stronger reason that you just haven't recognized or uncovered yet. Now, there are a lot of myths out there about psychedelics, and I really just wanted to touch on a few of them to give a little bit of context to some of the things that we talk about. If we know that psychedelics are powerful tools for spiritual growth, personal transformation, and healing, that can help us to bring that context into whatever setting we choose to take psychedelics. Instead of nagging worries or fears, we can start to reframe how we think about psychedelics and our relationship to them. Those of you who, like me, grew up being told that eating magic mushrooms will make your brain bleed or that LSD is neurotoxic will no doubt know now that these things are completely false. Instead, as we mentioned earlier, there's mounting research suggesting that psychedelics even stimulate neurogenesis, the formation of new neural connections in the brain. And yet for years, we've heard the same mantra from the United Nations to world governments saying psychedelics are highly addictive. Even the earliest studies on these unique substances were telling a completely different story. And so now we can look back and see that the political and societal stigma that rapidly spread following the psychedelic era of the 60s and 70s was really effective in putting a lot of fear and confusion into the general public perception of these substances. As a result, a lot of the things that we were told about psychedelics in the past are now being shown to be incorrect. So if you've heard something about a psychedelic that sounds like it has a little bit of that reefer madness flair, then it's worth doing some research. Maybe look online and try to find some more balanced resources, perhaps scientific studies that either support or counter those claims. That being said, I'm sure you're catching on to the message in this video that suggests that psychedelics are not the next cure-all miracle drug for mental health. There are a lot of factors that need to align in order to maximize the potential of these substances for therapeutic use. And that's why using a reliable framework that is built on core harm reduction principles like the 7-step framework is so beneficial for cultivating a relationship of safe and responsible use. Now, I just want to say a quick word about beliefs around psychedelics. We've broken down these myths so that we can have a clearer view and tune into some of the false narratives out there, but ultimately this is only the first step that we take in practicing discernment. When it comes to psychedelics, we don't want to latch on to any belief too quickly. Both in the psychedelic experience itself, as well as in the broader culture and communities within the psychedelic space, we may come across some radically different beliefs, and we may well have experiences that challenge some of our own fundamental beliefs. Psychedelics have the power to really alter or shift the way that we think and feel, and these changes in perception and in how we experience the world can really play out much longer than just the experience itself. Depending on how we integrate our experiences, these changes can influence the way that we experience ourselves and our connection to others and the world in the future. But they can also lead us astray. Careful discernment is worth practicing. So whether it's information that you've heard or read about psychedelics, beliefs or worldviews that you've encountered in psychedelic events or communities, or information that you received during an experience, it can be useful to hold a healthy amount of skepticism and not to latch on to anything as being the new absolute truth. That's going to help us to stay balanced and to hopefully cultivate a more rounded understanding of the psychedelic experience and how our psychedelic experiences relate to our lives and to our unique and individual journey. Let us know in the comments below what myths you've encountered or fallen for, or any others that we've missed. Give the video a like as well if you enjoyed this, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future.